You know, every single new medicine you can think of, from game-changing cancer treatments to the latest vaccines, they all have one thing in common. They were all tested on people. But how do we make sure those tests, which happen all over the globe, are actually safe, ethical, and give us results we can trust? Well, that's what we're digging into today, the Global Rulebook for Clinical Trials. I mean, just think about that for a minute. A new drug could be tested in North America, Europe, and Asia all at the same time. How on earth can we be sure that the data coming from all those different places is reliable? And even more important, how do we know that the people in those trials are being protected? Well, the answer comes down to this acronym, ICH GCP. It stands for the International Council for Harmonization's Guideline for Good Clinical Practice. You can just think of it as the global gold standard. It's the one framework that makes sure trial data is credible, and above all, that the rights, safety, and well-being of the people participating are always protected. But here's the thing. Science doesn't stand still. The clinical trials we're running today are way more complex, using all sorts of new technology and real-world data. So that gold standard, it had to evolve. We're in the middle of a huge shift right now, moving from the old version, E6R2, to a much more modern and, frankly, much smarter framework called E6R3. And this really shows you the massive shift in thinking. The old way was pretty rigid, kind of like a one-size-fits-all checklist for every single trial. But the new E6R3, it's all about being flexible and proactive. It brings in these amazing concepts like quality by design. It's like building safety features into a car while you're designing it, instead of just crash testing it at the very end. It's all about stopping problems before they can even start. So what's actually under the hood of this new framework? Well, at its very heart, E6R3 is built on 11 foundational principles. These are the principles that guide every single part of a clinical trial. And here they are, the full list. But, just reading through a list is kind of boring, right? So what we're going to do is group these 11 principles into 3 key themes. That way, we can really get a feel for how they all work together. And we're going to start with the most important one of all. Our first theme is participant protection. And this is the non-negotiable heart of good clinical practice. It's no accident that the first 3 principles are all about one thing: safeguarding the people who volunteer for these trials. First up, ethical standards. This principle basically anchors every single trial in the Declaration of Helsinki. That's a landmark document that was created to make sure the horrifying, unethical experiments of the past never happen again. The core message is simple, but it's incredibly powerful. The well-being of a person in a trial always comes before the interests of science. Period. Next up, informed consent. And let me be clear, this is so much more than just signing a piece of paper. It is a whole process. It has to be completely voluntary, no pressure, no strings attached. Participants have to get a super clear explanation of everything: the purpose, the risks, the benefits, any other options, before a single medical procedure happens. And yeah, of course, it all has to be documented. So who's doing the independent checking here? Well, that's principle number 3, IRB or IEC review. These are ethics committees. They're made up of doctors, scientists, and even people with no science background at all. Think of them as the impartial guardians, the referees. They review the trial before it even begins and keep an eye on it the entire time to make sure participants are safe. Okay, so once participant safety is completely locked down, the next big focus is making sure the research itself is solid and that the data is trustworthy. And that brings us to our second theme, trial quality and integrity. Principle 4 is all about scientific rigor. A clinical trial can't just be a random fishing expedition, hoping to find something interesting. No way. It has to be built on a solid foundation of existing scientific knowledge, and it has to be designed with crystal clear objectives. The whole point is to generate answers that are fit for purpose, which is just a way of saying the data you collect is actually good enough to answer the question you're asking. Next in this bucket is Principle 6, built-in quality. And this one really gets at that modern shift we talked about. Instead of having a quality control team swoop in at the end to find all the mistakes, this principle says that quality has to be part of the trial's DNA right from day one. You design every single process to produce a high-quality result from the get-go. And that leads us to one of the absolute biggest game changers in E6R3, proportionality. This is all about getting away from that old, rigid, one-size-fits-all approach. It means the amount of oversight and monitoring should be proportional to the actual risks, right? A trial for a new face cream just doesn't need the same intense level of scrutiny as a trial for a breakthrough gene therapy. It's about being smart and focusing your energy where it truly matters most. And what's the payoff for all this hard work? Well, it's principle number 9, reliable results. The way you collect, manage, and report your data has to be so rock solid that the conclusions are credible, they're reproducible, and they can stand up to intense review from regulatory agencies, like the FDA in the US or the EMA over in Europe. All right, on to our third and final theme, operational excellence. This is all about the practical, boots on the ground stuff. I mean, you can have the most brilliant plan in the world, but if you don't have a great team and clear processes to make it happen, what's the point? So to kick this off, we're actually jumping back to principle number 5, qualified staff. It's such a simple idea, but it is absolutely crucial. The people running the trial, from the main investigator all the way down to the entire study team, they have to be fully qualified. We're talking education, training, and experience. Expertise is the bedrock of a well-run trial. Next, Principle 8 is all about having clear protocols. A protocol is basically the detailed instruction manual for the entire trial. If that manual is confusing or way too complicated or just not practical, mistakes are going to happen. This principle demands that the protocol is concise, super clear, and actually doable so that everybody involved knows exactly what they need to do. Then we've got Principle 10, clear roles. In a complex trial with so many moving parts, you absolutely cannot have people wondering, wait, is that my job or your job? The responsibilities for the sponsor, the investigator, and everyone else have to be clearly defined and written down. This creates accountability and makes sure critical tasks don't fall through the cracks. And our final principle, number 11, is product management. This covers the actual thing being tested, the drug or the device. It has to be made according to something called Good Manufacturing Practices, or GMP, which are just standards for quality and consistency. And then it has to be stored, handled, and tracked with extreme care to protect its integrity and keep every patient safe. So there you have it. We've walked through all 11 principles. But now let's talk about the big so what. Why does all of this matter so much? What actually happens when these rules are broken? And what are the amazing benefits when they're followed? Because when GCP is ignored, the consequences are, frankly, disastrous. This is just a list of some of the most common problems inspectors find. We're talking about things like faking data, which completely undermines science, or investigators not paying attention, which can lead to serious safety problems being missed. These are not minor mistakes. They can put patients in real danger and completely invalidate years of research. But on the flip side, when these principles are followed, well, that's where the magic happens. First and foremost, it protects people. It guarantees the integrity of the science, which builds public trust. It creates one unified standard across the globe that actually speeds up the development of new medicines. Ultimately, this rigorous framework is what makes real medical innovation possible. And that kind of leads us to a final thought, doesn't it? ICH GCP evolved from R2 to R3 to keep up with how much research has changed. But now, as trials start to use things like artificial intelligence, wearable sensors, and even more complex global designs, you have to ask, what's the next evolution of good clinical practice going to look like? What new challenges will this global gold standard have to solve to keep protecting patients and making sure we get to the scientific truth? It's a question that's really going to define the future of medicine. Thanks for joining this explainer.